Hello, my name's Judy Ledgerwood. Thank you for inviting me to be a visiting artist for the SAIC Low-Res MFA program this summer, the summer of the 2020 pandemic. I grew up in rural Indiana, in farm country, where my parents were public school teachers. In fact, almost all of my family were either public school teachers or farmers. The most important thing about growing up in this part of the country is that the horizon line extends as far as you can see if you turn in a 380 or 360 degree circle. The horizon feels endless, and I think that's really informed my sense of space in the paintings. Indiana's famous for two things: basketball and pies. I have no athletic ability, but I'm a pretty good pie maker, and if anyone would like the recipe for these decadent chocolate fudge pies, be sure to send me a note. The most important part of my upbringing is that because my parents were teachers, maybe they valued an introduction to the humanities, and we visited the Art Institute of Chicago many times when I was growing up. The Impressionist room at the Art Institute was especially formative for me as a child and as a young adult because the brushwork in the paintings was accessible, and you could, or at least I could, start to intuit how the paintings were made. I also learned some basic color theory from reading the didactic panels and came to understand the strong relationship between color and light. There's another painting at the Art Institute that was really formative for me, and that's this Matisse painting called Bathers by a River. I make paintings that are organized as an all-over patterned flat field and paintings that are iconographic with a single centrally placed shape. These paintings are typically wall-sized, but I also make easel-sized paintings. I make paintings on paper, ceramics, and wall painting installations, but more on those later. Like the Matisse Bathers painting, my work mirrors architecture, with flat planes of color that activate the space in front of the painting. I use the surface of the painting to activate the space shared with the viewer, with the material paint in color and in texture. This frontal presentation activates the space in front of the paintings. I don't make illusionistic paintings. I don't use perspective or layering, or in any way make images that suggest that there's some aspect of the painting that's hidden from the viewer. Everything's on the surface of the painting and visually projects forward into the space shared with the viewer. Paintings are dependent on architecture. They hang on the wall after all, and architecture generally has the upper hand because actual three-dimensional space is more powerful than anything in two dimensions. Generally, painting is an accessory to architecture, a decorative element to bring the room decor together, usually positioned over a fireplace or over the sofa. My work is most successful when the paintings totally alter the space that they're in. These paintings subvert architecture, take it over, and the paintings come to dominate the spatial experience, which is a lot to ask of a two-dimensional object, and I think these paintings have come to perform well. The overall shape of the painting is irregular, and it appears to hang from the top. The break from the rectilinear form in architecture and the exterior edges of the painting allows it to stand apart from the architecture. This hanging shape might suggest a rug, a quilt, or tapestry, all objects from the craft tradition which has traditionally been excluded from fine art. Building on the work of Miriam Schapiro, an underappreciated elder stateswoman of the feminist art movement, my work challenges the hierarchy that exists between fine art and craft, expanding the art world to include historically marginalized form of craft, decoration, and abstract patterning associated with femininity and women's work. This painting, titled Cheetah, makes the feminist thinking that informs the work explicit through reference to a pattern that stands for the exotic and/or other in fashion and design. A cheetah is a large, powerful cat. A cheetah is a pussy cat. This painting has pussy power. Patterns in my work are developed from decorative motifs, utilized to organize the space within the edges of the format. Initially, the patterns I used were appropriated from vernacular culture in design and architecture, and worked effectively to activate the space in front of the painting. Research into the shapes, the triangles, diamonds, circles, and an elliptical seed-like shape that I call the lady shape, and the flower-like quatrefoil reveal a history of these shapes that proliferated in Stone Age goddess cultures. I address the experience of time, which is an obvious attribute of paintings based on repetition. There are multiple registers in my paintings that express time, the repetition of shapes being primarily contrasted with counter rhythms in the pattern within the edges of the organizing structure or grid. Time is experienced in color interaction, through vibrating edges of budding color. Shifts in ambient light or viewer position occur within time, and there is evidence of time in execution, including the drips of paint that occur in real time. The experience of time is not uniform or regular, as the use of a pattern in these paintings might suggest. Rather, these works suppress lived time, with all the expansions and contractions of how we experience time that make life dynamic. We all know that some minutes seem endlessly slow, while others are fleeting. I've been exploring a type of organizing structure which is based on irregular shapes of repeating triangular forms. I question if this mode of organizing has more potential to disrupt the status quo. Removing 90-degree angle from the paintings furthers the image away from architecture. I wonder if there's something about the tumbling relational structure that is more ideologically representative of where we're at today, but I haven't worked this theory out yet. This is a detail of the painting, just so you get a sense of what the surface is like. I make 3 kinds of paintings: fields of all-over patterns, flowers, or a single iconographic shape, and wall painting installations. I also make sculptures, ceramics, but let's not be here all day. In the field paintings, the strategy is to envelop the viewer within the field. Magenta in A minor is the title of this painting, which the title comes from my interest in synesthesia and my sensation, perhaps, that the color or certain color combinations suggest kind of musical tonalities or taste or even smells. Paintings at wall size create an immersive environment, but like any good artist, I try to challenge my work habits. So, over the years, I found ways to make smaller paintings. I'll share a sequence of the medium-sized paintings, all ranging from 60 by 50, 60 by 50, 40 by 50, and that range down to 15 by 15 inches. I don't strive for perfect regular forms. Perfection is boring. I used to tell my students at Northwestern, seeking perfect regular shapes, who were frustrated by insufficient technical skills, that the only thing perfect is death. I look for individuality and uniqueness in each mark and gesture that the painting is made up of. I think this approach points toward our shared humanity, rather than an unachieving, godlike perfection. So here's just a few of the paintings in that size. This painting's called Yanni. This painting's Migraine Fever. It took many attempts before I realized that the best way to deal with a really small 15 by 15 inch canvas was to simplify the number of elements in the painting. Just making a large painting smaller was not effective. So field paintings are out at this scale. At this size, the painting face mirrors the face of the viewer. I've come to think of the small paintings as individual personalities, almost like a portrait. Maybe it's because of the one-to-one relationship that they have with the viewer. This one's titled Devil Wears Prada. Smaller paintings offer more freedom to be experimental than working at a large scale. These works often generate ideas that I work through more complex compositions at larger scale. In fact, sometimes when I'm working through ideas for larger paintings, it's helpful to gather small paintings into groups that I lay out, one right next to another, edge to edge, to help me imagine what paintings with more complex color palettes might look like. Marie Antoinette, 15 by 15 inches. I find that working in a series encourages me to push the limits of the image, materiality, technical, expressive questions, more than working in large paintings all the time. I explore painting materials and processes constantly, and often dip into encaustic paintings, which I adore because the image develops out of the process of working with molten wax and using a heat gun to bound the layers of pigment together, which results in edges with furrowed swirls of paint, and the surface of the painting looks like polished stone, and it feels more like an object than a painting. I also make iconographic paintings the span of my arms. While the small paintings mirror the face of the viewer, the larger paintings correspond to body size. When the paintings hang on the wall, the center of the painting corresponds to the viewer's torso, somewhere between the heart and the belly. I found that hanging the paintings too high reduces them to pictures. They're much more active in relationship to the viewer, if the body, and not just the eyes, experiences the work. The quatrefoil mirrors the body and its forward-facing presentation with appendages on either side, a head at the top and a heavier weighted bottom. In a review of Max Gimlet at Gary Snyder Gallery and Art Forum in summer 2012, I read that a quatrefoil suggests a four-petaled flower. I'm sorry, this is a quote. A four-petaled flower. It also suggests the four cardinal points, the four dimensions, or the arms of the Eastern Orthodox Church, inspired by the Venus of Willendorf, primeval symbol of fecundity, as well as by the completely male quadrilobite design of the Tsuba, the Japanese sword guard. Carl Jung says the quatrefoil mirrors the fundamental human activities, sensing, feeling, thinking, intuitive, that make us human, pointing toward the center of being, like a mandala of wholeness. I want to acknowledge that at first I was apprehensive about using flower shapes in my paintings as a female artist. I used to get really upset when people referred to these as flower paintings, which of course they're not actual flowers. Eventually the power of the form was undeniable, and I found, and still find, incredibly satisfying to make this shape. The rhythmic execution of the shape is as satisfying as a 4/4 time in rock and roll. I keep thinking about the flower as a sexual organ of the plant, a portal of seductive invitation, and that's empowering to me as a female artist. Before we move on to new topics, I'll show you one more quatrefoil. This painting's called Walking on the Sun. It's 50 by 50 inches, encaustic on panel, from 2012. It's time to speak about color in my work, so I won't be accused of ignoring the elephant in the room, so here goes. In Western culture, there's a disregard for color. To quote the eminent color theorist Johann Wolfgang Goethe, quote, "People of refinement avoid strong color. Men in a state of nature, uncivilized nations, and children have great fondness for colors in their utmost brightness. The same applies to uneducated people and Southern Europeans, especially the women with their bright-colored bodices and ribbons." Goethe's ideas about color are a reflection of his time and his taste. And taste, I've learned, is a reflection of habit, although Goethe's time is still with us now. The modernist color palette begins with the primaries plus white, black, and gray. This color palette represents pure reason, which is funny once you learn how much intuition and improvisation was involved in the production of Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie. Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue by Barnett Newman? Like many in the pantheon of great modernist paintings, this is what significant art looks like. Color is powerful and absolute. There are many examples of this kind of artist that use color this way. Pure, strong, easily identifiable, and nameable colors. When the values of the color are very close together, time really slows down. This painting by Ad Reinhardt can be seen just barely due to the close tonality of the color palette, where one hue is nearly the same as another. The eye must adjust to see the painting, and this takes time. I like how demanding this work is. It does not give itself over all at once. In fact, it's what my dealer in Germany calls second sight. The idea that the longer you look, the more your understanding of what you're looking at is bound to change. Making paintings that can sustain extended viewing is something that I consciously work toward. Especially now, when it seems like even the way our brains work have been affected by technology. So slowing down is something that's really important to me as an artist. We all know the dark paintings that Rothko created for the chapel at the Menil in Houston. He was one of the few Abexers to work in a color palette that included color that was outside the Bauhaus canon. The brave, some could even say decorative color palette, and the soft, and the soft imprecise edges make me feel close to this artist. Early on in my career, I questioned if I could open up the canon of abstract painting and find a place for myself within it. By challenging the color palette that had come to commonly characterize modern painting. If male practitioners of painting worked in a limited range of colors, then I would expand the possibilities for painting by making delicate, pastel-hued paintings at the scale of heroic painting. One of the most difficult colors to work with for me initially was pink. Hard to believe that now. In 1993, the Art Institute was considering this painting for purchase by the SCA. The SCA is a group that supports collecting at the museum through the dues paid to the organization. This painting, along with other works under consideration, was brought in for presentation to the voting members. Charles Stuckey, then the director of the museum, presented my painting to the club members, and he said it was a pink painting made by a woman, and then never went on to explain the significance of any of that. So I wondered if maybe my intentions weren't clear, this idea that I was trying to raise notions of like gender and color and power in painting, so I made an even bigger, pinker painting. I can now happily report that this painting entered the Art Institute collection and was presented in the gallery with paintings by Alex Katz and Alice Neal, one of the great delights of my career as an artist. I think that was 2 years ago. Color has meanings that are deeper than the social implications of culture. Sometimes the colors, sometimes the history of colors is invisible. And yet this history is horrific. During the Second World War, the German chemical company IG Farben developed vivid new colors based on chemical research from coal tar industries. The research that produced these glorious colors also produced a poison called Zaclon B. This was a cyanide-based pesticide used during the 1920s to murder millions at Auschwitz-Birkenau and other concentration camps. IG Farben used slave labor from the camps in their factories. Aniline colors are those colors derived from coal tar process. They're vibrant and translucent and modern and tainted with evil. This painting, titled Waited the Catch, which is a term that comes from Walter Benjamin, which describes fishermen imagining what the haul will reveal once the net reaches the surface. The colors used in this painting suggest content that exists in name only. So the colors are working from bottom to top: cinnabar green, Indian yellow, Persian rose. Persian rose does not come from Persia. Persian rose is a mixed color made from benzimidazolone yellow, naphthol red, quinacridone violet, titanium white, and zinc white. Indian yellow was derived from cow urine that had been force-fed a diet of exclusively mango leaves, but to save the cows, the color is no longer made in this way. Cinnabar green in the bottom section is actually a mercury compound, and the stone is red. Cinnabar green is made from Prussian blue and chrome yellow with phthalo green, and it's a copper arsenic compound. Color resonates, or color walks as the title of this painting suggests, because of reverberations with the culture around it. There's an entire history devoted to the idea of color located in time, called color forecasting. Pantone is just one of the big names in this business. Curiously enough, the 2020 color of the year is classic blue. It's easy for me to think of this in political terms as November approaches. Each day is a color, and in true Flaneur style, one is attentive to only one color at a time if one chooses to take a color walk, which is a practice that William S. Burroughs, I wouldn't say popularized. I wouldn't say Burroughs was even popular. William S. Burroughs practiced color walks as a way of opening up his writing practice, and each day would be a color, and in true Flaneur style, you would be attentive to just that one color. Another aspect of color that I think about has to do with site specificity and ideas surrounding the way that each color looks in different light. This is the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua, which was the subject of Julie Kosteva's essay Giotto's Joy. She reflects on the luminous color from stained glass windows that fills the church. Her theory of color privileges the color blue. She writes that blue in particular has a decentering effect, and she goes on to state, in dim light, short wavelengths prevail over long ones. Thus, before sunrise, blue is the first color to appear. The primacy given to blue at the start of the day and at the start of the perception of light is also linked by Kosteva to biological development, where she surmises that centered vision, which is the identification of objects, comes into play after color perceptions. This leads to the conclusion that all colors, but blue in particular, as the first color perceived by the child's retina, take the adult back to the stage before the identification of objects and individuation. Thus, Kosteva seeks both a biological and a psychoanalytic answer to the question of the effect of this particular color. Blue is not only the favorite color of 80% of the world's population, but it also confirmed my interest in taking into account available ambient light in each site. It shouldn't have taken me so long to realize that I could simply paint directly on the wall to achieve an immersive painting experience. Even with my interest in site-specific ambient light and the relationship with painting to architecture, but I finally got there. In 1995, I made the first painting directly on the wall for the MCA, which I won't show you because it's hard to see a pair of paintings 17 by 35 feet each. And at the time, I was working through close-toned optical paintings that were lemon yellow on white or pale violet on white, and documentation of these paintings is just impossible to see. So this is a much better example of the wall painting installations that was commissioned by the Graham Foundation in 2014. I guess I just wanted to mention the size and the color because these days, as the art world is shifting so dramatically away from in-person viewing experiences, I'm struggling to think about how I'll continue to make work when so little of what I do feels like it can be conveyed through documentation. These wall painting installations behave like architecture, changing the experience of the space. This is primarily achieved through color and repetitive gestural decorative patterns that activate the surface. This formally domestic space is filled with cast color, and that floods the space with intimate, hot color. The color experience was so intense at the Graham Foundation that it would often take visitors quite a while to discover that the colors on the wall were not all the same. So there were pink walls on the exterior. There was an orange wall that separated the two rooms of the installation, and there were vibrant fluorescent red walls on either end of the rooms that contained the fireplaces. Most of the wall painting installations I make are temporary and have been hosted by institutions. But there have been occasional private commissions, including this living room in a home in River Forest, Illinois. The owner of this house has an extensive art collection, and I was relieved when he understood that it would not be possible to hang the work of another artist in this installation. In fact, just this year, he invited me to make a painting to hang atop the blue wall. So, if his interest continues, then I'll keep making works for his room, and therefore shut out all other artists in this space. LOL. The project for Blum Family Terrace at the Art Institute from May to September 2017 is one that I hope some of you have had an occasion to see. Typically, the terrace presents projects by sculptors, and more often than not, work done by male artists. I knew the commission was temporary and had to hold up to outdoor elements, so painting directly on the walls of the museum was not an option. After much research, it was determined that the surface I would be painting on top of could be printed on vinyl and applied to the walls and windows of the terrace. To maintain the shape of the exterior of the painting, remember my paintings droop, and to protect the museum walls from paint drips, a digital photo of the wall was printed on the base of the vinyl surface that became my painting. Interior space next to the cafe with the awning offered a tent-like protection from the elements. In color psychology, pink inspires warm and comforting feelings. The color pink gives the feeling that everything will go well or be okay. Most people have heard of the saying, everything is rosy. Everything is rosy. I hope I said that right. It may also indicate good health and success. Millennial pink, the Pantone color of 2017, is not to confuse with rose gold, which is the 2016 Pantone color. In this image, you can see the bottom of the painting where the digital print stands in for the granite wall of the museum. For this project, I wanted to use a color palette that actually did something physical, in addition to the cultural meaning the color can have. I turned to Alexandra Schaus, director of the American Institute for Biosocial Research, who said that color has a direct physiological impact. The electromagnetic energy of color, he said, interacts with the pituitary and pineal glands and the hypothalamus deep in the brain. These organs regulate the endocrine system, which controls many basic body functions and emotional responses, such as aggression. In 1978 testing, Schaus learned that a shade of pink he labeled P618 had the most profound effect. Schaus noted that by merely staring at an 18 by 24 inch card printed with his color, especially after exercising, there would be a result of a marked effect on lowering the heart rate, pulse, and respiration as compared to other colors tested. In 1979, Schaus managed to convince the directors of the Naval Correctional Institute in Seattle, Washington, to paint some prison confinement cells pink in order to determine the effects this might have on prisoners. Schaus named the color after the Naval Correctional Institute colors Baker and Miller. Baker Miller pink is now the official name of this color. At the correctional facility, the rates of assault before and after the interior was painted pink were monitored. According to the Navy's report, quote, since the initiation of this procedure on 1 March 1979, there have been no incidents of erratic or hostile behavior during the initial phase of confinement, end quote. Only 15 minutes of exposure was enough to ensure that the potential for violent or aggressive behavior had been reduced, the report observed. Thus, guests at the Art Institute of Chicago would not be exposed to violent or aggressive behavior. Schaus pink, or drunk tank pink, was originally created by mixing 1 gallon of pure white indoor latex paint with 1 pint of red trim semi-satin outdoor paint. The Santa Clara jail soon got word of P618 and in a rush to get results painted a holding cell pink and immediately placed inmates there for several hours. This resulted in prisoners scratching off the paint with their fingernails. Subsequent procedures were limited to 15 minutes. News of the color that saps your strength spread rapidly. In the 1980s, football locker rooms at Iowa and Colorado State were painted with this color in an effort to use color therapy to weaken the opposing teams, until a rule was passed by the Western Athletic Conference that both home and away locker rooms must be painted in the same color scheme. Pink was actually a color considered best suited to boys until the late 1950s. Blue was the girly color. While pink, which was essentially a watered-down red, was for boys, it was fiercer with their instinctive attraction to fire trucks and sports cars. Ladies' Home Journal in 1918 said the general rule is that pink is for the boy and blue is for the girl. Blue is considered more delicate and dainty. When did the gender switch happen? Maybe during World War II, when women took on more active roles? By the 60s, it could be argued that pink was an early sign of feminism. Alternately, the pink triangles used to identify homosexuals gave the color a queer association to North Americans. A 2013 book entitled Drunk Tank Pink is named for the color, written by Adam Alter, a professor of marketing and psychology at New York University Stern School of Business. This book describes how features of the environment, including color, shape how people think, feel, and behave. One of the challenges of this commission was that the Art Institute marketing team wanted to protect the view of Millennium Park for the guest who paid to rent the terrace for event. Who'd have thunk it? My first commission at the Art Institute, and I have to be concerned about the tourist. I made test panels of the pink vinyl over the windows printed at different densities to check that the view was not blocked completely. I learned afterward that this installation was the most popular with brides and other guests. It was even popular with the guards. I'd like to think it was the art, but I suspect they were grateful just not to trip over the sculpture. Cast color. These lovely puddles of pink would move onto the sidewalk below as the sun moved across the color, or moved across the terrace. We're almost there, but I wanted to touch on ceramics, which I've been making since 2002, long before the current explosion of artists making ceramics became so fashionable. This medium is the perfect opportunity to deepen my exploration into the relationship of art to the body of the viewer, as well as investigate the metaphorical body of the vessel. The language to describe these forms is derived from the body. These ceramic vessels have a body and a neck, and the base is called a foot, and often my shoulders on these forms are uneven, and the main volume is called the body of the form. So I think it's no coincidence that I'm interested in this form because of its relationship to the body. These forms allow me to address the interior and exterior form. So in the exterior, there's a regular pattern, more or less, and the interior is a contrasting, expressive, gestural glaze. These are ceramics in progress at an Arware workshop in Pilsen, where I'm currently working on them over the summer. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to speaking with some of you later this week. Thanks. Goodbye.